The first light of dawn stretched across Willow Creek like a soft brush of hope. Mist curled over the prairie, weaving between weathered rooftops, and pale orange sunlight touched the distant mountains, spilling over wooden sidewalks and rickety fences. A faint wind carried the scent of dry grass, the faint smoke of the baker's early ovens, and the hushed whispers of a town just waking. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolled, fragile and tentative, like a heartbeat in the quiet morning. Inside a dim, drafty cabin, Mary rocked her sickly infant with trembling hands. His chest rose and fell unevenly. Every shallow breath felt like a crack in her world. Pale cheeks pressed against the thin cotton of the blanket, and the damp strands of hair clinging to his forehead drew tears to her eyes. She whispered reassurances, low and trembling. "It's all right, my love. Mama's here." She adjusted the blanket again, tugging it closer, her fingers brushing away the chill that seeped through the cracked walls. Through the cabin's dusty windowpanes, neighbors peered. Some offered quiet sympathy, hushed words of encouragement. Others whispered behind curtains, gossiping, judging. Mary felt their eyes like weight pressing against her chest, a judgment she could neither escape nor confront. She bowed her head over her child, kissing his small forehead, murmuring a prayer she barely felt, clinging instead to hope. She wiped his damp hair, tucked the blanket snugly around him, and brushed a tear from her cheek. Her exhaustion mirrored in every movement. At the edge of town, hooves clattered against the soft earth. Luke rode steadily, returning from a long cattle drive. Dust clung to his boots, and the brim of his sun-weathered hat shaded a face carved by patience and resilience. He slowed when he noticed the cabin, the faint light through its windows, the tension visible even from afar. His instincts stirred a quiet courage, a protective impulse, careful not to startle. He dismounted, boots crunching against the gravel. Without a word, he lifted firewood from a leaning stack, placing it near the cabin's hearth. Mary looked up, startled, and he offered a small, steady nod, his calm presence filling the room with warmth. Together, they settled the baby into warmer blankets, fingers brushing in a fleeting spark of trust. The world outside faded, the wind, the creaking floor, the distant prairie leaving only a quiet moment of connection. In that glance, Mary felt a sliver of hope. In his, Luke recognized a courage that deserved protection. For the first time since dawn, the cabin seemed less lonely. A bond, fragile yet undeniable, had begun, a whisper of trust. The first step toward something neither had yet named, but both would feel growing in the days to come. The morning light seeped weakly through the cabin's single window, filtering dust motes into golden specks that danced across the worn floorboards. Mary's hands trembled as she checked the small bundle in her arms. Her baby's breaths were uneven, shallow, and each gasp seemed to echo in the quiet cabin like a fragile plea. She pressed her lips to his damp forehead, brushing soft strands of hair back from his pale face. "I'll keep you safe," she whispered, though even she struggled to believe the words. Outside, Willow Creek stirred with the usual sounds of prairie life: roosters crowing, carts creaking, distant voices, but Mary felt a chasm of solitude that the town could not bridge. There was no doctor nearby. The nearest one was hours away across rocky, uneven terrain. Her journal lay open on the rickety table, inked pages filled with desperate prayers, silent confessions, and tentative hope. She wrote and rewrote her fears, then folded the pages carefully, placing them in the small drawer beneath the window, as if shielding her thoughts from the world. Luke's presence had become quiet, yet constant. He moved around the cabin with deliberate care, fetching water from the well, tending the flickering fire, and bringing supplies without comment. He spoke only when necessary, and even then, his words were soft, steady, and grounded. "The storm's coming," he had said earlier, his voice low, as if the earth itself might overhear. Mary watched him, sensing not only his competence but also a patient respect that gave her heart fragile comfort. Sometimes he shared glimpses of his past, brief stories of loss, of hard work, of nights spent alone under endless prairie skies. She listened quietly, her mind slowly weaving trust around his actions rather than his words. Rumors of Luke's intentions had begun to drift through the town like prairie dust. Some neighbors questioned why he lingered near her cabin. Others whispered about his loyalty or curiosity. The murmurs were faint but persistent, a reminder that life in Willow Creek was rarely private. That evening, a prairie storm struck with sudden ferocity. Rain hammered against the roof in relentless sheets, wind rattled shutters, and lightning cast fleeting shadows that danced across the walls. Luke moved seamlessly between hearth and crib, his hands steady as he checked the baby's blanket, adjusted Mary's shawl, and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Their eyes met over the small glow of candlelight, an unspoken understanding passing between them in the quiet intimacy of flickering shadows. Small gestures carried weight, a guiding hand along the floor, a comforting glance, fingers brushing as blankets were tucked in. Each touch spoke of care, of trust slowly forming, of hearts beginning to lean toward one another. Mary hummed a soft lullaby, the notes trembling yet determined, while Luke's presence offered silent protection. The storm outside mirrored the tension of life pressing in, yet inside the cabin, warmth and fragile hope blossomed in the shared vulnerability of two souls quietly leaning into each other in that night of wind and rain. Mary glimpsed the possibility of support and connection, a fragile promise that even in the harsh prairie, love and courage could grow amidst fear and uncertainty. The dawn broke pale over Willow Creek, washing the dusty streets in soft amber light. Inside Mary's cabin, the air was thick with worry and the faint smell of damp wood. Her baby's breaths were ragged, the chest rising and falling unevenly under the thin cotton blanket. Mary's hands shook as she checked the infant's temperature, brushed hair from his forehead, and whispered urgent prayers. Each moment felt heavier than the last, pressing her toward despair. Yet she refused to succumb. Luke stood nearby, a figure of calm strength, quietly assessing the situation. "We'll get him help," he said gently, his tone steady, unwavering. Mary's eyes flickered with hesitation. The nearest doctor was miles away, and the thought of leaving the cabin and exposing herself to gossiping neighbors made her pause. Luke didn't push. Instead, he moved with deliberate care, arranging supplies in a worn saddlebag, folding blankets, and making sure the baby lay comfortably. Every action reassured her more than words ever could. The ride to the neighboring town was tense, yet intimate. The horse trotted steadily through the rolling prairie, hooves drumming softly on dirt paths. Mary held the baby close, Luke's hand brushing hers as he adjusted a blanket. Their fingers lingered for a heartbeat, then separated, both aware of the silent warmth passing between them. He leaned close to murmur encouragements, soft, unassuming words that carried strength and empathy. The wind tossed their hair, the prairie stretching endlessly around them, yet within the small bubble of saddle and blankets, trust and connection deepened. Returning to Willow Creek, the reaction of neighbors was mixed. Some peered from windows, offering tentative smiles or quiet words of support, while others whispered behind curtains, their judgment still palpable. The contrast struck Mary. Isolation could suffocate, but courage and companionship shared with someone steadfast and caring could lift even the heaviest burden. By the time the doctor arrived and the baby's condition began to stabilize, Mary realized that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to act despite it. Luke's unwavering presence, calm hands, and patient heart had guided her through the darkness. In the quiet aftermath, as she held her child close and met Luke's steady gaze, she understood that trust and emotional intimacy could flourish even amid crisis, laying the foundation for a bond that went far beyond necessity, one rooted in mutual respect, care, and the promise of something more. The sun had barely climbed over the distant hills as Luke urged the wagon forward, the baby swaddled carefully in Mary's arms. The path was rough and uneven, the prairie stretching endless and unforgiving, yet Luke navigated it with quiet determination, his gaze steady and alert. Dust rose behind them, mingling with the faint scent of wild sage and morning dew. Every creak of the wagon, every hesitant hoofbeat, was met with Luke's calm assurance, his presence a protective shield against the uncertainty of the journey. Arriving in the neighboring town, Luke approached the doctor with a measured tone and respectful persistence. Negotiations were subtle yet firm, and the skepticism of the townsfolk quickly gave way to recognition of his sincerity and purpose. Mary observed from the wagon, heart pounding not from fear, but from a mixture of gratitude and admiration. Each movement, each careful word from Luke revealed the depth of his gentle strength. The doctor nodded, agreeing to accompany them back and provide what care the infant required. Relief softened Mary's features, but she noticed to the rising warmth in her chest an acknowledgement of the quiet courage that had become his constant. Back in Willow Creek, Luke continued to stay close, coordinating care, ensuring the baby was warm, fed, and comfortable. Their conversations shifted from immediate crises to whispers of dreams and future hopes. While rocking the child, their hands met briefly over the soft cotton blankets, a fleeting brush that spoke volumes. Over the hearth, laughter slipped into tense moments, a balm to the long nights of worry. Their shared glances lingered, unspoken emotions blooming between moments of practical care. Word of Luke's unwavering dedication spread slowly through the town. Even neighbors who had once cast skeptical eyes began to murmur approval, noticing Mary's resilience mirrored in the steady devotion of the cowboy at her side. As the infant's breathing steadied, a fragile but powerful sense of hope took hold. In those quiet, tender moments, trust deepened, love began to stir, and the bond between Mary and Luke grew stronger, a connection forged through heroism, intimacy, and shared courage, promising both romantic fulfillment and the reassurance of mutual respect in the face of adversity. The late afternoon sun cast long, golden streaks across Willow Creek, illuminating the dust that swirled lazily along the wooden sidewalks. Mary adjusted the blanket around her baby, humming softly to calm the child's restless movements. The tranquility of the cabin was shattered by the sudden creak of the front door swinging open. Her father's stern face appeared in the doorway, flushed with anger and disbelief. "Mary, how could you rely on that cowboy for your child's care? Have you no sense, no pride?" His voice echoed through the cabin, harsh and accusatory. Mary's heart thumped, but she drew a steadying breath. Beside her, Luke stood tall, hat in hand, a calm presence in the storm of confrontation. His eyes, steady and unwavering, silently communicated that he would not let her face this alone. He shifted slightly, placing a reassuring hand near hers, a subtle but undeniable shield against her father's wrath. Mary lifted her chin, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. "Father, I love my child, and I will do everything I can to keep him safe. Luke helped us when I had nowhere else to turn. I trust him because he has shown courage, kindness, and loyalty. That is more than I can ask for." Her words hung in the warm, dusty air outside. Some townsfolk had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Whispers faded as they watched Mary's quiet bravery, her honesty, and the palpable respect Luke gave her. The creaking of the floorboards, a breeze stirring dust motes in the sunlight, and the faint rumble of distant thunder set a cinematic stage for this confrontation. And the shift in perception, one by one. Small gestures of acknowledgement emerged. An elder nodded, a neighbor offered water. A soft smile passed between women who had once whispered behind hands. The baby stirred peacefully in Mary's arms, a fragile symbol of resilience and hope. In that moment, the healing of hearts both familial and communal began. Mary's gaze met Luke's, a silent exchange of gratitude, trust, and burgeoning love. Together, they had faced fear, judgment, and uncertainty and emerged stronger, their bond deepened by shared courage and the promise of a future they would build hand in hand. The prairie stretched endlessly under a sky, painted with molten gold and soft lavender streaks as the sun began its slow descent. Mary adjusted the blanket around her baby, now resting peacefully in her arms, the faint rise and fall of tiny chest bringing a calmness that had once seemed impossible. Only a handful of townsfolk lingered at the edge of the clearing, their presence quiet and respectful, bearing witness to the intimate scene without intrusion. Luke knelt beside Mary, brushing a loose strand of hair from her forehead with the gentlest of gestures. His hand lingered briefly on her shoulder, a touch full of reassurance and admiration, conveying everything words could not. Mary's eyes, once clouded with fear and doubt, now held a steady warmth and maternal confidence. She glanced at Luke, gratitude and affection reflected in a smile that needed no declaration. The wind whispered through the tall prairie grass, rustling in harmony with the distant chime of a church bell carried faintly on the breeze. Luke's hat shielded his eyes from the low sun, but the intensity in his gaze softened as he watched Mary cradle their child. Moments passed with small gestures, fingers intertwining, shared glances, the occasional quiet laugh at the baby's tiny movements. The scene was saturated with golden light, cinematic in its simplicity, yet profound in its emotional resonance. As the sun kissed the horizon, Luke helped Mary into the saddle, the baby snugly secured between them. They rode slowly across the undulating prairie, dust trailing softly behind, hair tousled by the warm wind. Each glance exchanged, every subtle brush of fingers, told the story of resilience, love, and triumph. The fading light painted them as silhouettes against the vast sky, a family united through hardship, strengthened by courage, and bound by deep, unwavering love. The horizon ahead promised new beginnings, a life full of hope, belonging, and the quiet magic of shared devotion.